And welcome back to the Financially Simple Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Goodbread, and we are dealing with yet another period of lunacy. It seems like, man, every day I turn on the TV, I go to my desk, I start looking at what is happening in our world, and I got to tell you, it gets a little bit like, I can't believe this. In fact, one of our clients today made the statement. They said, we can honestly say no one has ever dealt with this before. No one has ever dealt with this before. So joining us today on the podcast, I have two of my friends. These guys are savvy business owners. Let me tell you, these guys are amazing. They also have I said these guys twice, by the way. I don't know if you caught that, friends. They also have their own podcast, and they don't say these guys on their podcast. Now, this is Wes Mullins and Jon Rogers, the dental guys, are joining us today on the Financially Simple Podcast. Hey, guys, how are you?
Hey, doing great, Justin. Glad to be here.
Glad to be here, Justin. Thanks for having us.
Doing great. I don't know if that's really what we should say. That's just the default thing when somebody asks you, like at church, how you doing? Oh, great. Yeah. Probably not the most accurate, but we're making it.
So that's the voice of Jon Rogers. And Wes, chime in for us a little bit so we can get the distinction of voice.
Well, it is true. It is kind of the default saying, like, it's been a great day, doing great. And I do like to stay positive, but as you know, Justin, we've got some more news today, right? It changes every moment. So yeah. Thanks for having us, Justin. I appreciate it.
So, friends, for those of you who want to check out their podcast, it's called The Dental Guys. I got to tell you, they talk about a lot of weird things. I don't even understand half the language. They talk about teeth. And if you have like this phobia of going to the dentist, you definitely do not want to listen to them because it is kind of gross sometimes. Yeah. But the reason why I asked Jon and Wes to come on the show is not only are they savvy business owners, and I can say that, I've seen the data. These guys are rock solid entrepreneurs. But not only that, but they also have a platform to where they're doing like we're doing. They're encouraging their listeners to try to add some calmness would be the word I'd like to use, add a little bit of thinking, holistic thinking to what we're dealing with. Now, obviously, we all want to be informed, but the questions that I had for Jon and Wes today, and the reason why I asked them on the podcast was, how are they dealing with this particular crisis is the word now I want to say, the crisis of the coronavirus. How are they dealing with in their practices? And what has been the feedback that their teams have heard? What has been the feedback their patients have given? What about the communities that they each are practicing in? So, Jon, let me start with you on this questioning, man. What decisions have you made as an entrepreneur as a result of the coronavirus?
Well, first off, we knew something was coming, over the couple of weeks even before this, and we saw other countries, responding or trying to respond to it. So we were already kind of talking about this and from a healthcare standpoint, but when it came to the actual moment where, because there's kind of two things with this. One is healthcare and one is business. And these are both things we have to think about in our world is, you have to be, and Wes really inspired a lot of this saying that I think we kind of both have taken is you have to be, 51% business and 49% healthcare, just enough more business that you don't, shut down and lose everything, but you still have to have a very close balance with healthcare. And so we made the decision to shut down the practice as a result of some recommendations made by our association, which was not a regulatory body, but they said, we recommend that you really postpone all elective treatment. And we had to make a tough decision as a business. Do you continue to try to work because you haven't actually been mandated to shut down, or do you try to do what's best for the healthcare side of things? And so that was the first decision is, are you a doctor? Are you a healthcare provider first, or are you a business owner first? We still have to make this decision to be a doctor, be a healthcare provider. So that was the first thing we did is just make a decision. It's time to put, the welfare of other people first. And then at the same time, as a business owner, all these cogs start turning and you start thinking about, okay, all the unknowns. And I'm very much a planner and a spreadsheet person and a think as far ahead kind of person as I can. So, the first thing I did is I called my advisors. I called my advisors and said, okay, smarter people than I need to be involved in this decision. I need to understand what decisions I'm actually needing to make. What are some of the things I need to do short-term and long-term? We had to then, after I had about a day of sitting down, talking to the people that I needed to talk to, then it was a matter of making decisions on talking to my team, to my staff, my team at the office. We sat down the next day and we said, okay, so first off, here's our short-term and long-term plan as far as, what's going to happen with everyone here. And so, we can get as specific as you want on that, Justin, but as a general basis, I made decisions to preserve cash and capital as much as possible in my business, shut down everything that I could to have non-essential cash not going out, called the bank, had some discussions about, hey guys, there's some uncertainty. Everybody knows this. Let's try to slow down or stop anything we can involving debt payments, involving non-essential services, and making the bank aware. And then talking to the team about, how payment is going to work. How are they going to get paid? What's that going to look like? And I still had some uncertainty, and we'll be talking probably more about that today. But that was kind of my order of things. Talk to the advisors, figure out, first of all, preserve every dollar that I have as much as possible, come up with a strategy for that, and then take care of my people, make sure that they're feeling secure. So hopefully on the other end of this, we can come roaring back and be ready, to come back to our patients, come back to our business, and hopefully, more than make up for the time that we've been out.
So Wes, did you and your practice, did you guys take the same approach that Jon just orated, or did y'all go a different approach?
We pretty much echoed what Jon just said right there. It was pretty much the exact same thing. We followed the recommendations of the associations, the American Dental Association. It's not a regulatory body, but in fact, Jon and I and one of our advisors on Monday evening, that this all kind of came down, we were actually in a meeting because we were seeing other states' regulatory bodies actually make some decisions. And while we were on that meeting, the American Dental Association, which is not a regulatory body, made a recommendation that essential dental procedures, basically non-emergent care, basically be just stop it. And at that point in time, Jon and I just looked at each other through the camera because we were meeting via conference call with our advisor, and we said, okay, let's go ahead and put phase 1 into place. So phase 1, we kind of phased this out. So we were told to basically, stop working for 3 weeks at a minimum, right? And so phase 1 is that minimum shutdown. So we have a phase 1, and we decided what phase 1 was. And a lot of those things that Jon talked about, the banks, all that stuff was in phase 1. And then I think it's important during something like this, like we've talked about this with even you, on a daily basis, you have to reevaluate. And you actually made a great comment to me last Monday. You said, let's make one good, solid decision a day about our businesses. And I've really employed that, and that really helps me going forward. So we've put into practice what we call phase 1 shutdown. And then we actually had our team come up with what phase 2 and phase 3 would be clinically. And then also, we're working behind the scenes on the business side of things. What's phase 1, what's phase 2, and what's phase 3? And then there's a personal aspect of that, right?
Right.
So personally, my wife and I, we looked at what phase 1 means for us. And phase 1 meant that we need to call, right, our banks and say, okay, this is what happened to our business, and this is what we want to know what's possible. We may not stop making our home mortgage loans, right? But we want to know, like, I know what's available to me. So I'm preparing just in case. Are there essential things that are really not essential, right? So my wife and I identified some essential things that we need and some non-essentials that we can implement immediately to be able to save cash and hold our money. So I applied these same business principles of phasing out the shutdown, like depending on how long it goes, to my personal life as well.
Well, you lead me into an interesting question there. One of the things we don't know is how long this is going to go. And I read some interesting tweets over the weekend as I was doing some research, and Twitter was scrolling in the background, and I read some tweets from employees of businesses where owners and businesses maybe perhaps didn't communicate in the fashion that the employees desired. And the tweets were very negative toward the business owners. And I know firsthand, knowing both of you, and you guys know me, that many times business owners struggle. I've lost countless nights' sleeps over caring for my team. Because I love them deeply. And I know that, as I often say, we pay a lot of house payments, a lot of car payments through our businesses. So I guess the question, Wes, I'm going to kick this one back to you, being we just to dive a little bit deeper on your side, is how did your team handle the closure? And then, John, my follow-up question to that is going to be, how did you internalize that message of telling your team that you were going to close? What was that process that you went through psychologically? So, Wes, how did your team handle it, man?
Yeah. So Tuesday morning, right, the very first thing we did, the very first thing I did on, the worst thing you can do as a leader is not lead, right? So people look for leadership. And so immediately, as soon as the American Dental Association and we got off our call, I sent a text to everyone. I said, hey, just got this information and we're going to do this. We're going to meet in the morning to decide what we're going to do going forward. So there was a clear, concise message to my team members immediately. It didn't have a lot of information. It was just clear and concise. So I showed up to the office. I stood in front of the whiteboard and I had a list of things. And I summarized one thing at the top. I don't know when we're going to come out of this, but I know the goal is, number one, to emerge ready. Now, I went through a whole list of things. We could get into all that about what we said in that meeting, but the gist of it is, to answer your question, is how did my team respond to this? Well, first, the leader of the team, I don't get nervous in front, of large groups of people. I've lecture and teach, and John and I talked about this on our own show, but I could see my hands shaking, right? And I'm only talking to like 8 people, and I'm shaking because there is uncertainty, but I'm also leading. So later that evening, I get a text from one of my team members, and I'm going to read that text. It says, I just want to thank you for how you've handled this whole situation. I know it's been a lot of stress on you, and the fact that you handled it with such peace shows how you truly trust the Lord. It really means a lot to have a boss that really cares about his employees. I am looking forward to coming back stronger than ever, whenever that may be. And so that was the response. My whole team that day, they had direction. And for the next 2 days, we did what we call spring cleaning. There's a lot of things in our offices that are required to do to kind of shut down. But the whole team was just energized and excited, excited in an uncertain time, right? And so that's kind of the gist of what happened.
So we just had a podcast released by Paula Harris. I know both of you guys recognize that name. She did an episode on leadership. And Wes, what you just described was actually right out of John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. I mean, that's exactly what you voiced. But John, I know as a leader, and I hear so many business owners. I mean, I'm talking to literally dozens, if not 50 business owners a day right now. And I hear the internalization that happens far before what Wes just described in front of that team members. I guess my question to you, John, is as you were going through this process and you're an analytic in your thinking, how did you focus or frame in your person the emotions, the closure? And the reason why I'm asking, as you think about that question, is because here in Knox County, just before we jumped on the podcast a few minutes ago, our mayor, Glenn Jacobs, just gave us a Knox County Safer at Home order that came across my desk just before, like minutes before we came on the podcast. And we're seeing now states nationally and businesses nationally who are now having to deal with exactly what the two of you went through some weeks ago now. So John, as you speak to this answer, this question, think about the other business owners who don't have the ADA, who maybe aren't financially prepared, but they're having to internalize the same message that you've already internalized and that Wes was just describing. How could you give advice to them? As somebody who's already walked through that path, how did you internalize it? Can you speak to the emotions and the logic of that particular decision?
Yeah, I mean that's a big question, and it's a very heavy question, because you come to a realization in a pretty short time as a thinker, where you realize, all right, it's going to happen, but immediately my mind at least, um, you talk about all the personality testing and things. It's always interesting how people react to things, and you've kind of got your two big picture, at least very big picture ideas of the thinker and the feeler, and how you look at things. And I'm definitely a 100% T, when it comes to that. So my first way of handling stress or, fear or emotional things is just to say, well, how can I come up with a plan? And so the easy part for me was, let's come up with a plan. Let's come up with, all the things that I can imagine people are going to want to know. And I think that's the first step, is how do you determine your process? Think about all the things that your team is going to want to know, all the questions that if you were in their shoes, they would ask, and try to anticipate those things and try to put those things down on paper or on a spreadsheet or something like that, and go through your thoughts as if you were them. And then, but also as you're thinking through that, and you're going to encounter the emotional side of it, where fear can overtake your thought process. And depending on the situation that you're in, even if you're in a good situation, even if you've been planning and you kind of feel like you know where you're headed, you still are going to have this emotion that creeps in and kind of starts getting you thinking, but what if, but what if, but what if? And I think that, what I've learned over the years as a thinker, as a primary T type of person, is I've learned to let that in. I've learned to let that emotion in, and to let that affect the way that you approach things. I think that that's been helpful. So as I'm thinking through this and I'm coming up with a plan, I'm allowing myself to feel okay, because I want my team to feel with me. I want them to see that as we talk through this. I want them to understand that, yes, we have a steady plan. I'm going to own this. I believe in ownership, and from a standpoint of, hey, somebody's got to have the big picture plan and have to have the details. But as I'm expressing that to them, I'm telling them, hey, there's things I know that you guys are feeling right now that are very unsure, and that's okay. And there's things that I'm unsure about, then here's what they are. And we don't need to be afraid to go there with our teams. But I think that it's a matter of understanding that if you are if you've thought through this, if you have a clear plan, or if you don't, talking to people that can help you with that can help you put together a clear plan, then I think it's a good thing to express how you feel about your business, about your team, and express that kind of passion that you have for why this is hard, for why this is difficult. Because what I've found is I'm expressing this to my people, and it's just getting reflected right back to me. They are hearing it. They are hearing, number one, that there's a plan, which immediately starts to help them. But also they're seeing, and they know, because they know me, but they're seeing, they're hearing some of my fears, some of my passions, but also the fact that I have a positivity that it's coming through about this, that we're going to be okay here. The future is bright. We have some uncertainties, but we also have some things that what are the things that have made us successful up to this point? None of those things have changed. Not a single one of them has changed. So as long as we keep in mind that I'm here for you guys, I'm here to help, do whatever I can to take care of you. And I know you're going to want the same thing for me and for the business and for our team, for our patients. In the end, the same things that made us what we are still going to be there when we're done. So it really, I've gotten better at that side of it. I wasn't always that good, at this, but in the last few years, people have influenced me to really let that out more. And I think it's made me a better leader.
So Wes, Jon points out something interesting, the thinker, the feeler. We've dealt with that with 16 personalities. That's where those terms came from, and part of the Myers-Briggs and the DISC profile. Wes, you're the exact opposite in personality that Jon is, and you're more the feeler first. So I'm going to throw the same question at you because, Jon, I think you make a good point there that I'm a thinker. I often don't feel. And
Mm-hmm.
so, Wes, you're the feeler on the thing on this particular episode. So
I'm the outlier.
yeah, you're the outlier. So as we're dealing with business owners who perhaps are that feeler versus that logical thinker, so to speak, that person who's like playing the chess game in their head, like I love to do, right? How did you prepare yourself? I imagine it was probably tougher in some instances for you to deal with it than it was for John or I to deal with a type of a decision. So what advice would you give, Wes? Here's my question. What advice would you give to business owners who are the feeler type of personality that now see a closure, a temporary closure coming that's now in many parts of our country being mandated? How would you help them through that process, or how did you go through that process?
So when I identified myself as a feeler, right, that was the best thing that ever happened to me as a business owner, because it immediately said, okay, this is who I need to go get to help me think, right? And so I remember there was a point in time in my career where I didn't have people that were influencers around me, per se. Like, surround yourself with people that maybe can help you or are better than you, and that'll help you to succeed. And one of the people's that you've got to go find, or the people that you've got to find, is like the people that compliment you, or maybe even not compliment you, but actually feed into what you need, right? Because if I go out and find a feeler, right, well, that's just telling me what I already know. And so I'll never forget the day whenever I went through this analytical thinking thing, right? And because I had already started to I was using some of the things that I was applying. And the person that knew me, they said back to me like, Wes, you've never even said any of those things before. Where's this coming from? Because it was a very thinking driven process. And I said, people have helped me, right? I'm changing, right? I'm trying to be better. And so for the filler out there, I think that maybe you lose a little bit more. I don't think you lose more sleep, but you definitely are going to process things very emotionally. Like your decisions that you make in front of your team, right, can be knee-jerk reactions. And that's the problem with a feeler, right? You see how I talk? That as I'm making decisions, my number one thing to do is to stop and think before I speak. And that comes from my father, really, because he's known me better than anyone. Is he said, Wes, I need you to stop and think before you react, because the knee-jerk reaction for me is to speak my mind, which is a feeler's mind. And so as a leader, I would say that if you are a feeler, that you do need to stop, think, surround yourself with people that are thinkers, right? Or trend that way to help you lay out thinking in a systematic, logical way. Otherwise, you're going to make emotional decisions. And as you know, Justin, emotional decisions most of the time are the wrong decisions. So that's my answer.
Yeah, it's interesting, guys. I just had a brief come across my desk today from the Retirement Institute, and it was talking about that exact point. They were dealing with the individuals who had advisors, various types of advisors versus those who did not have advisors. And the statistics, the results across like 70 different categories were amazing to see that the advisors, those who you pair to complement you, as you were just saying, Wes, you can often make wiser decisions. In fact, one of my favorite books I like to read every year is the book of Proverbs. And it says, in a multitude of counselors, there is safety. And I think that's the principle that we all can apply, especially during this time. So let me change gears a little bit with you guys. Okay. So John, I'll volley this one over to you. You know, we hope, and many of us pray, that the circumstances that we're dealing with will soon be resolved. I don't look to our government to solve the solutions, although I think they will. Help solve some of the problems with what they can do within their purse strings. I don't look to customers or vendors to solve the solutions. Ultimately, I think at the end of the day, as I've often said here recently, I will bet on the entrepreneurial spirit of our American business people every day of the week. And at the end of the day, I believe that more now than ever, small business owners, some 30 million strong, according to Marco Rubio. I'm interested where he got that number from, but some 30 million strong, according to Senator Marco Rubio, can impact the change, and we can be the catalyst for change. We're seeing that with some of the results that we're dealing with, even with manufacturing. I saw yesterday where distilleries are no longer producing alcohol instead for consumption. Now they're using hand sanitizers at mass quantities. So a lot of things are coming from the entrepreneurial spirit of society. But John, one of the questions that I'm struggling with in my mind is, how do you start it back up, man? So you got a practice here. You got a business that's in the healthcare business. Now, thank God your particular business is one that's a necessity. It's not one, it's one that is recession proof for the most part. It's not one that's a luxury style business. But I mean, to shut a business down or shut our economy down, like we have, or like we're experiencing in such a drastic measure. I mean, think about it, John, back in February, we were running a 3.3% GDP on a national amortized base. That's amazing to go from cruising. I mean, it's like taking off a plane, cruising altitude, and all of a sudden you're on the runway. I mean, just the sheer velocity of the ceasing or the stopping that we put on this economy. Dude, what are you going to do to start your practice back up? Think about that.
Yeah. Another big heavy question, and
I'll
think
send the next one to Wes. Okay. I'll send the heavy question to Wes next time.
Okay. No, that's good. It's a good question.
Because I really want to learn what you're going to say.
Yeah. I wish I had all the answers on this. I can tell you what my initial thoughts are, and we're going to have to put in a couple of assumptions, right? Because we don't know some things, but let's assume, right? And gosh, you hope this ages well, right? When we say these kinds of things, but let's assume that we're probably going to be shut down longer than what we think. I think that's probably true. I don't think it's going to be the initial 3 weeks that we were told. I think that's just the beginning. So let's assume that it's a longer closure, and let's assume that, I don't know, and this sometime in the next couple of months, at some point, there comes a tipping point where we say, okay, the risk and reward ratio favors going back to work. I think that the key is, first, what are you doing while you're not at work? And that's really the first place that I'm starting by trying to keep top of mind. And that's a principle in every business that everybody that's in business probably understands. Even if you don't know the terminology, you understand that you want people to be thinking about the need for your service or what you're selling. And we're selling healthcare, which is a pretty easy sale because people want to be healthy. And I think that I'm going to first off try to leverage what is on top of mind for many people right now, which is health. And, emphasize first off, what can they be doing while they are kind of away from us to stay healthy? That tells them that we're interested in their health and we're not just interested in their money, because we really truly are interested in the relationship. And I think if you can maintain a relationship where your customers, your patients are feeling that you care about them, that you care about their long-term welfare, which we do, and you then say, okay, I'm going to do that by being engaged with you. And that engagement might mean putting out content during that time in some way with marketing or discussions or whatever you can do. But what does it actually mean when we get restarted? Hopefully they've had that in our mind. Well, my first thought is, don't assume that you're going to be doing what you were doing exactly when you left. And so be smart about it and think about how can you keep your costs low while providing the highest return on that investment of your team. And so my thought is that probably we will roll out slowly with the most necessary and profitable procedures. I'm going to try to kind of complement those two things. Things that patients see as necessary are number one. That's going to drive most of what we do. A lot of that will be preventive and people wanting to get their routines back. I think there's a huge, as we're seeing, there's such a huge loss of routine. And I think that, people coming in for their routine stuff is actually going to drive a lot of the recovery. And it's going to be reestablishing those relationships. And then it's also thinking about what procedures can you be doing in your practice that are profitable, in your business that are profitable. If you're in the, the hardware store business, you don't maybe restock everything. You stock the things that people are going to need right now, and you stock the things that have a high enough return on investment that you can start getting back in the game, making the payments on your overhead, reestablishing a cash flow in your business that is positive. Even if that means that it takes you time to get back up to that full, I do not believe we're going to be coming back on full bore. I think it's probably going to take us a month, maybe more, before we are back up at any type of semblance of the same type of production levels. Hopefully it's quicker, but it might actually take longer. So again, talking to your team about that, preparing them for this is going to be a slow ramp up. What's phase one of the ramp up? Maybe 2 employees, 3 employees. Maybe it's, a full schedule for just half of our providers. And then it's see how that goes and then gradually build up more and more and more. So that's my thought process, is it's phasing, but it's also keeping top of mind during the time that you're down so that you don't end up trying to restart it all on day one. That's just not going to be successful. And I think we're going to end up, just being slower to get back going if we try to do it that way. So that's the best I got right now. It's not perfect.
No, man, that was a good answer and a lot of wisdom there, friends. If you listen to the thinker go through that step. And I know, John, you and I have had some private conversations about that. John Riley, who runs Dental Revolution, and had just had him on the podcast, and I think it's going to go live tonight or tomorrow, whenever it goes live. But we were actually dealing with that exact point, John, that you mentioned about staying top of mind during this bit of turmoil, because, one of the things more than ever is people now have time. And they're tired, candidly. Everybody I'm talking to is tired of the media. Not to say that they're evil. I don't want to go that far, but it's like there's so much negativity. So if we can provide positivity during this time period, it will help our businesses and ultimately those who we have the honor of serving in our businesses and through our businesses. So, hey, Wes, with that thinking, though, another tough question. So you're not going to get off scot-free here. I'm going to throw a hard one at you here, bud. Let's make the assumption that you're a business owner who actually had to lay off team members. You had to make the hard call. And candidly, all 3 of us may be in that position within the next few weeks. We just don't know as of today because everything's so fluid. But let's say you had to lay off team members. Now, I know some business owners who are listening to this podcast have already made that decision. They made the decision so their team members could go get unemployment insurance so they could survive and perhaps participate in some other benefit programs that the government is turning out for us. But my question is not the fact that we have to lay off somebody. That is business. As Michael Gamboli, who was on the podcast talking about the Family First Act, he said, "Suck it up, Buttercup. You're the small business owner. You signed up for it. Now live with it." So I love the way you kind of framed that for us business owners. But my answer is not around the decision. My question is not around the decision to lay off somebody, Wes. It is, let's assume that a business owner has had to lay off an employee for viability of the business. What would you do as a feeler, as a thinker combo? What would you do in your business to stay in contact, to, I'm going to use the word loosely, retain that quality team that so many business owners are now having to look at with tears in their eyes and say, "I'm sorry, there's nothing else I could do"? What would you do to retain that team? And if you had to stage them in, as John just mentioned in his answer, maybe 1 at a time or 2 at a time, as opposed to coming all back up to 100%, how would you communicate? What would you do to retain the team during this time period?
Well, what you're asking is basically, how do you create loyalty? Right.
That's better. That's a better, much better. See, guys, I told you they're wicked smart. I mean, I just ramble for 5 minutes and he asks one question and boils it all down to like three words. That's the friends I have. So yeah, Wes, that's what I'm asking. Thanks.
So how loyal your employees or your team, right, is really up to now, right? And what you've said whenever you laid them off, right? Because it's hard to generate loyalty backwards. And how do you do that? Well, that's impossible, right? So if you're a terrible leader and you want everybody to come back, and you want everybody to phase in or not go to work somewhere else. Well, I don't know how you're going to create loyalty going backwards, right? So everything that I've done up to this point is created loyalty, right? And so here's what I did, right? And this is awesome because I'm glad you asked this question, is I did get a little worried, right? Because here's what I said last Tuesday morning. I said, look, some of you are going to be just fine financially. Some of you are going to need to collect unemployment. And then some of you may need another job in the midst of all this. Let's just be honest and frank. And I had somebody ready for them to go to work for. Okay. And just so happens there was someone that reached out to me as an owner and to one of my team members and said, hey, if you have anybody that needs a job, I have a place where they could come to work that won't be shut down. It's an essential based business. And one person raised their hand and said, well, I don't know if I want to file unemployment on you. That might affect your business. Now that's a loyalty comment, right? That means that person's very loyal to you. You know what I said to them? I said, look, we're all in this together, and you do what you have to do to support your family. If you need to take another job, if you need to do something in the midst of this, it's all about how you're going to take care of your family first. I'm doing what I need to take care of my family. And I'm going to do as much as I can to keep you employed and do the things that I can going forward as much as possible. But we're all going to primarily take care of our families, right? And so I have a girl that's coming in a couple hours a day running and processing certain things at my office. And I just saw her today, and she was one of those that came to me and she said, hey, I think I'm going to work a few hours each day at this place. And she was like, I just want to let you know that. And there's a sense of like worry that they'll go there and they won't come back. That's the feeler in me. But I know that this person is very loyal because of the loyalty that I've generated. How you treat your employees or how you have treated your employees to this point right now, when a crisis happens, is how you build loyalty. Now we can talk about building loyalty amongst employees. It's a totally different question. Am I concerned that some might not return? Of course. That's probably, or I'm prepared for that to happen. And one of the things, I have a couple of people that are going on pregnancy leave and one that's already on it. And you know what I tell every expectant woman whenever they tell me that they are expecting is I tell them, hey, listen, the first thing I want you to know is I expect you not to come back. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, because your primary goal is to take care of your family, and you're getting ready to put a new family member or bring a new family member into your family. And I'm like, when you're ready to come back, let me know, but I'm expecting you won't. So we're going to prepare for you not to come back. Right. And they're immediately like, well, okay, I see what you're saying. Right. I'm trying to create loyalty because I care about them. Right. And that's why you're asking the filler this question, because I do care. Right. Do you care? Right. As a small business owner, right, you are the HR, right? You are, and I think a lot of people are having to come to terms with this. There's a guy that's running a business that's much bigger than mine, 80 employees, and he's having to be the HR guy, right? Because he's got to lay off. So some of you might not have that task or that ability. So you have to rely on advisors, and you have to rely on help to help you make those decisions and communicate effectively to your employees. It's a long answer. I don't even know if I answered it, Justin.
Yeah, I think the loyalty comment at the very beginning and then trying to explain how you created loyalty within your business is key. It was Woolworth who said, Mr. Woolworth of the Woolworth department store says, if you treat your team members right, I'm going to butcher his statement, but basically if you treat your team or your employees correctly, they'll treat your customers correctly, which ultimately ends up treating you correctly. And he coined that phrase, and the Marriott Corporation brought it in, and then now the Ritz-Carlton now takes that own organizational structure. So
yeah, I'll follow up with that and say this is that, evidence of loyalty is turnover, right? How much turnover do you have in your business, whatever it is? And some businesses are built on turnover, right? It's part-time help or whatever it is. It's just a continual cycle. Well, there's no loyalty there, right? But some businesses should be built on loyalty because you have a very relationship business. Our business and the business that I've chose to run is built on loyalty with my patients, and therefore I'm trying to create loyalty amongst my employees.
Okay, so let me flip it back over to John for a second. John, one of the questions I've been asking business owners during this time, we all approach things at different points of life. It's been said we are the sum total of the decisions we've made in our life. And so each of us are in a different position. Some of us have been prepared financially. Some people have not been prepared financially. Some people have prepared emotionally. Some people have not prepared emotionally for this. Some people have prepared their teams, as Wes was just discussing. Some people have not prepared their teams. And so you've got different people at different caveats. You have some people who are running around with extreme fear, and you have some others who are running around with extreme faith. And so you have a whole world, a smattering of various business owners. The question I have for you, John, is this. If you could give one and only one piece of advice, pearl of wisdom, as I call it, if you could give one pearl of wisdom to a business owner out there at this point with where you're at in your thinking and where you're at in your mindset today, what would that be?
So I think that would be something along these lines. Regardless of how prepared you are or how afraid you are or how you think everything's falling apart or you think you're in great shape or whatever, this is a moment in time that defines who you are. And when it's all said and done, when we retire or quit or whatever, the number of widgets that you sold really won't matter. That is interesting and is sometimes fun and sometimes scary and all these things. But what really matters is who you are and how you treated the people around you, how you inspired people, what they learned from you. And this is the moment where we are going to define who we are as people, as human beings, and how we want to be remembered. And I know that sounds like super big and hairy and kind of a crazy thing to say, but there's not many moments I think we can say in our lives that will be truly defining moments of kind of like who we are in our business. And I think in, however many years, when I look back on this time, I want to be proud of who I was. And so I would just say, make decisions that you feel like will make people proud of you in 5 years and 10 years, that your kids will be proud of, that your employees will look back and say, I'm proud that I was associated with this business or this person, that's your spouse, that you're, whoever. And if you look at it from that perspective, things become more clear if you run it through that filter. And if you don't run it through the filter of fear or the media or just purely emotions or purely thoughts, and you just try to externalize it right now and go, what do I want people to remember about this moment about me? And I think that it's not going to make it easy. That's not the point. The point is not easy. The point is that it is hard. And that is what we do and why we do it. It's not to be easy. It's to be hard. And requires hard decisions, but it requires doing the right thing. And I think that there's all kinds of these stories that are going to be coming out in the next year or so in our world, in our country, in our local community of people that live that way. But there's also going to be people who choose the wrong path. And so as business owners, we need to choose the right path. I think it's going to solve so many problems in our businesses, the fabric of our society, and also keep entrepreneurs as the people that are the fabric of our society instead of those who make decisions only to benefit themselves. So I think if you think that way, you're going to be okay.
Friends, that's sage wisdom from a dear friend of mine by the name of Jon Rogers, Dr. Jon Rogers with Rogers Family Dentistry, also one of the dental guys. If again, check out the links in the show notes below to his practice and listen to the dental guys if you really want to learn some really gross stuff. So Wes, let me flip it around to you for a second. You've mentioned a couple of times through the podcast of a team and how individuals have inspired you and prepared you mentally for this particular event. You know, not everybody, as I mentioned to John just a second ago, not everybody has prepared for this particular event as we often should have. Now, maybe not of their own accord, maybe not due to slothfulness. It could be just timing. I mean, think about young professionals who just started a business during this boom that we've had all the way up till February 19th, that all of a sudden timing just rocked their world. So we're not here throwing darts. Everybody knows that. But I want to go back to the statement you made earlier about building a team. And for full disclosure, friends, Wes Mullins is one of my best friends in the whole world. I mean, I love this guy. I love Jon Rogers. These are dear friends of mine. And I asked them to come on the show because I know them personally and I know their character and I know their position. And so full disclosure, Wes and Jon are very dear friends. They also happen to be clients. So full disclosure there. But Wes, as we're dealing with this question, as you've alluded to a team, I don't know when this thing is going to end. I don't know that. I don't think any of us can today sit here and know the answer to that. I think daily we're dealing with things. In fact, someone just told me this morning, we can honestly say no one's ever been here before. No one in our world has ever dealt with this situation. And to quote the philosopher Olaf from Frozen 2, when you can't see what to do, you just do the next right thing. Okay, we got that. So the great philosopher Olaf there, as I'm quoting it. But Wes, maybe someone finds themselves right now not fully prepared. Maybe someone finds themselves prepared more so than they ever thought, but yet this thing lasts longer than any of us think. Who do you advise that a business owner, a human, who do you advise that they build their team with? Who are those individuals? And it doesn't necessarily have to be business related. I mean, I'll tell you, one of my team members is my pastor. Man, think about some of the pastors who run churches of 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people. I mean, these are heck of business owners. So I don't think it necessarily has to be financial in nature or tax or anything, but who do you advise in your world as you're thinking about building that team? If you were talking to somebody who just found themselves in a circumstance that they need help, who would you tell them to put them on the team?
Well, it's been said that in your lifetime, you'll have 5 people, 5, that you can truly call friends, right? Now I'm talking about people that if you called them today and you were stranded without anything, they would be there for you no matter what you did to them, right? No matter what you've done for them or done to them or whatever, right? They are in it through thick and thin. So what I want you to do right now, if you're listening to this, is I want you to define your 5, right? And I have to say that I've talked to those 5 people almost every day since this started. Why? Because those are the people that I rely on to get through things that we don't understand, things that we don't even get, right? They may not be a owner. They may not be an entrepreneur. They may be, right? It probably they come from different walks of life. And sometimes those people, most of the time, those people might not tell you exactly what you want to hear, right? And I've tried to make my 5 a priority in my life recently, more, right? And it's tough because, it's tough because you don't really know sometimes who your 5 are, right? You may not even talk to 5 people. I don't know until something like this happens. And then you start finding out. So what if you don't have 5, right? Well, then you need to take time right now and you need to write it down. So, my 5 would be, again, Justin, you said your pastor. My pastor, someone I've talked to. I've talked to some of my associate pastors. I've talked to my brother, who's a missionary in the United Kingdom. I've talked to my my other cohort, the John, the dental guy, right? And I've talked to Justin Goodbread. I've talked to my father. I've talked to my father-in-law, and I've talked to my wife. Now that's more than 5 people, but those are the people in my life that influence me. That's my team, right? Because really what it boils down to, even though we try to build a team of people as small business owners and entrepreneurs, you have a team of people behind you, right? It starts with the person that's behind that door making all the noise. It's doing the laundry and teaching my daughter how to clean the bathrooms right now. It starts with her and her confidence behind me and me communicating with her. But I would say the number one thing you need to do is take time right now and write down 5 people. And then what you need to do is make an action plan. You need to call those people. You need to call them and you need to talk to them about what's going on right now, right? Because if you don't start sharing and talking with people and getting feedback about what you should be doing, then you will make emotional decisions and they'll probably be the wrong decisions. So,
well, guys, I certainly appreciate you coming on, taking your time out of your busy schedules as of today. I know that all of us are dealing with things with family, friends, faith, all those different things. But before we sign off here, John, tell me a little bit about where friends. I know I've been kind of having fun with the dental guys, but in all seriousness, you guys doing awesome work. You're top of your class. I mean, guys, ladies and gentlemen, if you looked at the resumes of these 2 individuals, you'd be amazed at the caliber of craftsmen they are for their particular industry. John, just quick plug for the dental guys, what it is, your mission is, what you guys are trying to achieve in the dental community.
Yeah. So our goal is to try to help dentists to take their practice to the next level. That's kind of what it boils down to for us, is taking people at all levels of clinical skills, business skills, but mainly clinical skills. That's kind of our primary focus, and trying to help them take that to the next level. Some of that is by following our individual journeys of what we've learned and some of the people that have influenced us, and trying to introduce our listeners to some of those people. But it's also through those others telling us what they know, and then we being able to bring that back. So what we try to do at the Dental Guys is we try to take some really big and complicated ideas in dentistry, and we try to boil them down into things that you can take home and use in your practice that help to get you going up to that next level and making your dentistry better, making your dentistry more fun, making your practice better. So that's what it's all about. You can check us out on the dentalguys.net, thedentalguys.net. We're also on Facebook and Twitter and the Instagram and all the stuff there on YouTube. We have both audio and video podcasts that you can find out. If you just go to our website, you kind of find out where all those links are. We'd love to have you listen if you're in the dental field in any way connected to that. We'd love to geek out with you.
Well, friends, you've been listening to Dr. Wesley Mullins of My Family Dentistry, one of the dental guys, and Dr. Jonathan Rogers of Rogers Family Dentistry, one of the dental guys today. Just kind of share an entrepreneurial journey, what it's like to be an entrepreneur, how we're having to deal with some of these day-by-day questions, and give them a little page love. Go check out their sites. I give them a hard time because it is dentistry, but these guys are wicked smart. As you can tell, they're dear friends, but they are wicked smart. Hey, look, I realize we're dealing with uncertainty at this point. I do. I realize that life is hard. It is, but life is good. Every day I'm now trying to scour the airways to find good news, and it's out there. It's everywhere around us. It's raining here in East Tennessee today, and one of the things that I noticed was good was I watched a lady who had a flat tire on the road coming into work, pouring down rain, and there were 3 vehicles stopped behind her, and there were 3 men changing her tire. One guy was in a suit and tie, changing her tire in the rain. I don't know about you. That made my day because there's goodness all around us. All we got to do is open our eyes and see it. I realize things are frustrating right now, but life doesn't have to be. Money doesn't have to be. We're going to continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Hey, y'all go out there and make it. It won't happen on accident. You've got to make it a great day. Y'all take care.